Abraham, I want to thank you all very much for coming to get accepted to Stanford Graduate School of Business. I've been an innovator in MBA admissions consulting since launching Accepted way back in 1994. The website went live in 1996. Accepted is one of the first MBA admissions consultancies on the web way back then. Is one of the first to host online chats. They were text only at the time. And later, one of the first consultancies to present webinars like this one. It is a co-founder of the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. And I actually served as the organization's first president. And Accepted was one of the first to have an admissions-focused podcast, which is now one of the longest-running podcasts in admissions. And that podcast is Admissions Straight Talk. If any of you would be interested in listening, I'd be happy to have you join me weekly for that one. I'm looking forward to sharing my 27 years of admissions consulting experience with you today. Before we begin, I want to mention a few to-dos that will help you maximize your time here and one that will help us improve these webinars. If you have not yet downloaded your webinar worksheet, take a second to do so and print it out. You'll find it linked to from the chat window. From the chat, there's going to be a link there in just a second. If you have not yet downloaded it or checked it out, I would recommend that you download it, print it out, and use it to take notes. And obviously, if you don't want to print it out, you can take notes online, whatever you prefer, but I think it will help you get the most from today's presentation. I'm going to ask questions along the way during our masterclass today, and I'll ask you to raise your hand in response. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon on your control panel, and I bet you already know that. We're going to use a question window for your questions. I have a lot of time at the end of the Q&A for Q&A, and I'll actually be joined by Natalie Greenblatt-Epstein, who's going to help me with responses here. She's a former admissions director at 3 MBA programs and a highly experienced MBA admissions consultant in her own right. But you can post your questions at any time in the question window. At certain points in time, I'm going to ask open questions during the masterclass. Please post your answers to my questions in the chat window. If we use the question window for your questions and the chat window for your responses or comments, I'll be able to go through more questions during the Q&A. It'll just work a whole lot faster. I also want to mention that we're going to have a fun contest at the end of the masterclass, and you can win. The contest will be based solely on content presented during the masterclass, so stay tuned and prepare to win a free consultation with me. Now, when you leave, you're going to receive a brief survey. Please fill it out. I read all responses. I value your feedback. I try and use it to improve my own performance, as well as to select content for future webinars, podcasts, blog posts, etc. Now let's test your hand-raising skill. Please raise your hand if you are here because business school, and specifically Stanford GSB, will speed you on your way to the career of your dreams. Again, raise your hand, click on that hand icon if you believe Stanford Graduate School of Business will speed you on your way to the career of your dreams. Okay, great. Well, most of you know how to use Zoom and are here for the right reasons. Before we start, let me get a better sense of where you're at in the application process. And we're going to post a poll for this one. So just respond on the poll. The question is, how committed are you to applying to Stanford? Definitely, probably, maybe, or doubt it, but I'd love you to convince me otherwise. Again, the options are definitely, probably, doubt it. Maybe, and then doubt it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, with 90% having voted. Fantastic. And here are the results. 79% are definite, 10% are probably, 7% are maybe, and 3% are doubted. Well, this is a very committed group and also a very active group. I think we have a great audience here today. All right. And then the next question I have for you is, I'm planning to apply round 1, round 2, round 3, or later. In other words, next cycle or the cycle after that. Okay. And again, the options are round 1, round 2, round 3, or later. We're at 81% having voted. Can we get it up higher? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's close the poll. And with 87% having voted, it's 55% are round 1, 31% are round 2, 3% are round 3, which would be their most likely the deferred admission, but it doesn't have to be. And then 10% are next year or later. Okay, great. That's wonderful. Thank you. We can stop sharing. That's good information to have. All right. It's cool. It's the most entrepreneurial of the top MBA programs, with 18% of 2020 grads starting their own business at graduation, matching the program's previous high from 2013. It's Stanford, at the heart of Silicon Valley's entrepreneurial ecosystem. It has a highly customizable program, small class size, and weather that can't be beat, except perhaps by my alma mater, UCLA. The rest of this webinar will be devoted to helping you get accepted to Stanford. The first part of the masterclass will be presenting a 4-part framework and applying that framework to Stanford's 2021-2022 application. You can use the framework on other top programs too, but the focus will be strictly, again, Stanford's application for this year, MBA application. And we'll also talk about some tactics for presenting yourself via the application. I'm also going to issue certain warnings and caveats during the masterclass, because these are mistakes that I've seen applicants make over the years. The first one is thinking that you can kind of fake it, all right? A dab of makeup won't do it. Waving magic wands won't do it. Even spin won't work. This isn't ping pong. You can't fail with cosmetics, magic, or a good backhand. What you need when you apply to Stanford Graduate School of Business is substance. And by substance, I mean competitive qualifications and an effective presentation of those qualifications to show that you fit at Stanford. Your overriding aim is to show that you belong at Stanford GSB. Now, let's dive into the nitty-gritty. How do you intend to show you belong? In the chat window, please. Could you give me an indication? I'm sure you've thought of it. How are you going to show that you belong at Stanford GSB? Show entrepreneurial experience. I'm not sure what you mean, Ram. I suspect there's a spelling error there. By matching class profile. Okay. Civic mindset. Good, Valeria. Anybody else want to give a guess? Anybody else? You must have thought of it. How are you going to show? Being myself. I love to help others. Okay. Initiative and collaboration. I think that's critical, Trevor. Show how Stanford can bridge the gap between my past experience and future career goal. Excellent, Sally. That's definitely part of it, big part of it. Along with my PE job, I'm a co-founder of an NGO, entrepreneurial. Okay. Overall ambition in life, that's part of it. Demonstrating leadership in work, definitely part of it. Show impact focus. Excellent, Akshita. Part of it. Change with the organization or industry. Excellent, Rajat. That's definitely part of it. Okay, leadership, community engagement, have a coherent story leading me to GSB post-MBA goal. Good, Rania. That's all part of it. You're all hitting on part of what you have to do. And that makes sense because you don't have a lot of room in the chat window. But let's go methodically through this 4-part framework and then, again, turn to the Stanford application. So the first part of the framework is demonstrate that you can do the work and excel. Now, the easiest way to demonstrate that you can do the work and excel is through your undergraduate transcript and test score. And the point here is you want to show that you can do the work. If not, and by the way, that was exactly the term used in a recent presentation that I attended given by Kirsten Moss for MBA admissions consultants. If not, how can you convince Stanford to accept you with below average grades? Realize that the average GPA for accepted Stanford students was a 3.8. For the entering class of 2020. And that the farther away you are, especially if you're below that average, and there's not much above that you can go, the harder it's going to be to show that you can do the work, especially if both your grades and your test score are below average. Now, if you're concerned about your undergraduate GPA, please see 5 A's for your low GPA. You can find that at accepted.com/137. I devoted a whole podcast to mitigating the impact of a low GPA. One of the ways you can mitigate it is with a high test score. Stanford's overall GMAT average for the entering class was 733, up 1 point from, this was in 2020, from 2019, 732. That is the highest GMAT score of any US MBA program ranked by US News. The average GRE is 165 on verbal and 164 on quant for an average total of 329. And there you can see on the screen now the ranges. If you are close to the bottom number in the range, whatever test you're taking, or below it, I strongly advise a retake. If you're not sure whether to retake or not, please see that GMAT score or either the short video, the blog post with a short video, or the webinar that I did where I explore who should retake, under what circumstances, when, why, etc. Part one of the framework, however, is showing you can do the work. And somehow, some way, you need to show that you can do the work effectively and not struggle with either basic math or communications. That was part one. Part two of the framework. Have a goal requiring a Stanford MBA. And it has to be a clear, realistic goal, somewhat aspirational, but you need to be able to show why you want an MBA from Stanford GSB and how you intend to use it. And several of you mentioned that when we did that little exercise a minute ago, okay? Ron, that's an excellent question. Please ask it in the question window, and I will try and get to it during the Q&A. So what is a post-MBA goal? Well, in very simple terms, it's what do you want to do, not study, and in what industry do you want to do it after you earn your MBA? And you can see that in the screenshot here from this year's Stanford application. Desired industry category, desired job function. Now, job function, again, is what you want to do, not study. This is also addressed in Stanford's essay questions, and we're going to get to that later, and Stanford's essay 2. Stanford also asks, as you can see here on this box, please write a sentence or two about what you aspire to do after graduating from Stanford GSB, and they limit that to 255 characters, which is roughly, very roughly 50 words. It's really, really short. By using the word aspire, they're encouraging you to stretch a little bit. So the answer in the text box should be different from the drop down, not what you want to do immediately after post MBA, but more about the impact you hope to have, the change you hope to create, if you will, in the long term. And so this is aspirations by their very nature are usually longer term and maybe a little bit more of a stretch. They certainly can be more of a stretch. What do you hope to accomplish or contribute is much more than what you want to do immediately upon earning your MBA. One presentation I attended once at Stanford, they talked about insane levels of greatness. Okay. Again, aspire in that box. Now, in the chat window, please, what are your thoughts? Why are the goals important to the schools? Why do they care about what you intend to do? Diego, to measure cultural fit. Good point. It's definitely part of it. Employability. That's a really interesting point because actually at this presentation I attended by Kirsten Moss, which was just last week, I think. It was a Association of Independent Graduate Admissions Consultants presentation. She said they do not consider employability in their admissions process. Many schools do. Many schools do. To see you have a plan that aligns to what the school can offer, excellent. They want to make sure that they can provide you with what you need, excellent. To ensure students get what they want. Yeah, you're all going in the right. I want to see if you can realistically achieve, right? Yeah, you're all going in the right direction. Adran also says ensure diversity of people admitted. That's part of it. Impact is definitely part of it. Okay, really, really good. This is really a wonderful audience. The basic reason is schools want to know that they can help you succeed. Now, you need to know how you define success for them to know if they can help you succeed. And admissions should be able to connect the dots between where you've been and what you want to do via Stanford's program, career strengths, and extracurricular opportunities. So that's part 2, right? Part 1, show you can do the work. Part 2, have a goal requiring your Stanford MBA. And part 3 of the framework, show that you have what Stanford seeks. And several of you have alluded to that, okay? Even Sardar's last comment, best fit. This is certainly about fit. But before we get to Stanford's criteria, I want you to focus for a second on Stanford's motto: change lives, change organizations, change the world. And I think for you as an applicant, you have to think about times when you have been a change agent. Because if you've been a change agent in the past, Stanford has greater confidence that you will be one in the future. And that also has to do with your goal, obviously, and those aspirations that we talked about. There's another point, change lives. Are you open to change in your own life? And this was a critical point in some of the webinars that I've attended. Are you open to taking advantage of a transformational experience? You have to be willing to be transformed. To me, the defining characteristic of the accepted Stanford students that we've worked with, and we've worked with many over the years, is a willingness to take initiative when you see a need or opportunity, a willingness to solve problems and offer solutions. And if I can put that into one word, it would be initiative. Okay, that's the key word for Stanford. Change lives, change organization, change the world requires initiative. So just this whole bit of initiative, being a change agent, etc., is critical. Now, Stanford, in addition, has 3 criteria very clearly laid out. The first one is intellectual vitality. That's not just test taking or showing that you can do the work. That's curiosity and an openness to learning new things. And that curiosity and openness to learning new things can be evident in many places in your application. It can be evident in the classes you took, in other words, your transcript as an undergrad, or the classes you've taken since you graduated college, perhaps a minor that you had that had nothing to do with your professional goals, interest in a dual degree program at Stanford, other interests and hobbies that you pursue just because you enjoy them. Stanford also wants to evaluate quote, your interest in seeking new knowledge or expertise, your willingness to test and challenge assumptions, and your ability to develop new ideas or perspectives throughout the application. And in a nutshell, are you interested in expanding your intellectual horizons? Stanford does not want to see a checklist or treadmill approach to life. Well, I got to do this, check. I got to do that, check. Or I'm just on this treadmill. I got to keep going. I got to keep going. That's not what they're interested in. And you can't present that in your application and expect to get accepted. The second of Stanford's criteria is demonstrated leadership potential. The key word in that phrase is demonstrated. What results have you achieved? How many people did you empower on your way to achieving those results? Kirsten Moss, again, is the Assistant Dean and Director of MBA Admissions at Stanford. She has earned a doctorate in psychology with a focus on organizational leadership. Guess what's important to her? I mean, I think her dissertation actually was on leadership. Now, a key GSB assumption, and this is true of most MBA admissions offices, is that past actions usually are the best predictor of future behavior. For Stanford and for most business schools, leadership implies integrity and character, but fundamentally, it's about assuming responsibility for a particular outcome and motivating others. Directed idealism is one way of looking at it. And what you're looking also for is behavior that reflects those ideals. So that's the second of Stanford's criteria. The third is personal qualities and contributions. And that's your individual perspective and ability to contribute uniquely to Stanford's class and community. Now on the screen, you'll see what Stanford wrote about it. And I'll read it. To understand how you will contribute to the Stanford community, we'd like to know who you are. Not simply what you have done, your values, beliefs, identity, passions, experiences, ambitions will help shape the perspectives of your classmates and enrich our community. So there's no question that this is the most difficult to grasp and subjective of Stanford's criteria. But the one thing that's really clear is that superficiality and canned responses will hurt and possibly kill your chances of acceptance. But authentic individuality, and I don't mean you have to climb Mount Everest or swim the English Channel or even discover a cure for cancer or COVID. That would be great. Authentic individuality poses much less of a risk than uniformity and conformity. At this point, we're going to get more into how you can present yourself distinctively a little bit later. But I'd like you to just take note that there are major differences between mouthing platitudes or spitting back the website or the phrases I've just given you from their criteria, and really showing that you share the values and meet the criteria. The former, frankly, you're back to magic, putting on makeup, and it doesn't change the substance. Trust me, makeup doesn't get rid of the wrinkles. But examples in your essays, your bullet points and resumes, the items in your job descriptions, what you put in that boxes is extremely important. The information in your application boxes, letters of recommendation, responses to interview questions, your application as a whole must all demonstrate these qualities. And now I'd like you to take a second and on your worksheet or a piece of paper, or back of an envelope, or whatever you want, write down ways in which you could demonstrate the qualities Stanford is looking for. Again, intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, and your individual ability, your personal characteristics that would show your ability to contribute, right? Personal qualities and contributions is the third one, as they call it. Again, personal qualities and contributions. This is for you. Just write it down for yourself. So you don't have to spit back the phrases at all, but you do need to know the person you see in the mirror and hopefully applaud that person and reflect the individual human being throughout your application. Another warning. If you focus on the rankings or Stanford GSB's brand, Silicon Valley, Google, Nike, HP, all that stuff, you will completely obscure this fit aspect of admissions and you'll be focusing on the wrong things. Stanford knows about its brand. It knows about Silicon Valley, Google, Nike, etc. It wants to learn about you. And if you focus on those things, you will blend in with all the other people making the same mistake. You want to stand out in a positive way. You want to show you have a distinctive experience and perspective to contribute. Stanford has lots of applicants and can be choosy, and that leads to the last part of the framework. So the first part, show that you can do the work. Number 2, have a goal that requires a Stanford MBA. Number 3, show that you share its mission and values and meet its criteria. And number 4, last part, demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute, there you go. Demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute distinctively to class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud. Now, we've already touched on slightly the need for individual perspective in relationship to Stanford's third criteria, right? The personal qualities and characteristics and qualities and contribution. A lot of the third criterion has to do with how you will help form the class. What will you add? How will your experience and perspective enrich the class and alumni network down the road? And that's not just a matter of perspective. You also need a track record as a contributor, a person who has made a difference and will continue to do that. You need to show that you've had impact in the past through your essays, resume, activity history, interview, and letters of recommendation. And that's closely related, as I mentioned, very early on in the masterclass, it's closely related to Stanford's values as reflected in its mottos. So what you have to do is show that you've made a difference in the past so that Stanford will have confidence that you'll continue to make a difference in the future. Do you have the work experience? Let's look at your experience for a second. Do you have the work experience quantitatively and qualitatively that will allow you to contribute in class? Have you made contributions through community service? Now, there are some very fine organizations on the screen. There are thousands of organizations that are in existence that you can make such a contribution with. And you can also start your own. You don't have to participate in an existing organization. You can start a new initiative or your own group to meet some specific need that you see. And that way you will be showing yourself as a change agent and implicitly identifying with Stanford's mission. So at this point, what I'd like you to do is in the chat window, please give some examples of when you have been a change agent, when you assumed responsibility, demonstrated your leadership potential, and created change. It could be on the job, it could be off the job. And if you could put that in the chat window, I'll comment on it. And I think you'll get some idea of the role of specifics and concrete descriptions. Organize a call for ideas for young people during COVID-19. Okay, Valeria, how many people responded? How many people did you organize? Did you take the idea and actualize it? Set up the CSR unit for my organization. Again, how many people were affected by it? What has been the outcome of the CSR unit? Started my own nonprofit for at-risk minority girls. Very good. How much money have you raised? How many girls have been helped by your organization? What was the change that you affected as a result of their participation in your nonprofit? Demonstrated leadership, enhancing the services which benefited financials of clients. Again, how many clients? How much were they benefited, either in percentage or dollar or I forget the Indian currency right now. I'm sorry. Is there some measurement that you can use? 3,500 participants with 250 plus projects. Okay, now you're talking, Valeria. Now you're talking. Around 100 of my clients, much better. Started an e-commerce startup in the sustainable fashion space to reduce the negative impact of the fast fashion industry. Okay, wonderful. How much sales have you had? How fast has it grown? How can you measure the reduced impact of your startup as opposed to the typical fast fashion industry? Okay, great. Rupi, thank you. I'm sorry. Of course. Thank you, Natalie. Okay, 10,000 community members increased enrollment from 10% to 6%. Excellent. Now we're talking specifics and real impact. Okay, do you see the difference? Raise your hand if you see what difference it makes when you get concrete and talking specifics. I would hope more of you see it. Okay, at least some of you see it. All right, you can lower your hand. Okay, we'll put the hands down now. All right, let's move on. If you focus on specifics, they will naturally allow you to stand out. They will also reveal you as a unique individual you are, and they will make your accomplishments much more significant, much more concrete, much more credible. Now, at this point, I'd like to I want to kind of continue on this thread, and I'd like to start sharing a few polls here, okay? So the first one is, how many of you work in high tech or for Pinterest? And I realize if you work for Pinterest, you're also in high tech. So yes, you can answer to both of those. Okay. So let's close the poll. About 25% of you are in high tech, and I think it was 3% are or 10% rather. 90% of respondents were in high tech, and 10% were in Pinterest. Okay, let's try the next poll. How many of you have traveled outside your home country? How many of you have trekked in New Zealand? Now, I realize that if somebody's here from New Zealand, they could have trekked in New Zealand and they wouldn't be outside their home country, but let's see. All right. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And yeah, so I'd say about 2/3 of you have traveled outside your home country, but none of you have been to New Zealand. And the last one. Oh, you shared the results already? Okay, let's do the next one. How many of you have volunteered in college or since college? And how many of you started a support group for siblings who have lost siblings as children or young adults? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Almost 80% of you have volunteered in some capacity, but only about 8% have started that support group. And I'm actually kind of surprised it was even that high. But okay, what's the difference between the first and second question in this last series of polls? In the chat window, please. The first is vague or general. And what about the second one? You're right. Second is more specific. Right. One is a catch-all, the others are specific things. And what happens when I ask questions in specific terms or you respond about specifics? What happens? It's unique to you, right? Right. Well, only a few people. You differentiate yourselves. If you talk in specifics, you differentiate yourself. If you talk in generalities, you kind of sound the same. So this is what I mean by you don't have to have swum this, climb Mount Everest. You don't have to have, I don't know, done something crazy, spectacularly different. You just have to talk about your own achievements in specific terms, because as Isha is saying, the specific answers really allow you to shine as an individual and allows the admissions panel to identify you better. I couldn't have said it better, Isha. You want to get up here? You did a great job. You're 100% right. 100% right. So when you describe what you do, are you going to say that you're an engineer or a biomedical engineer? Are you a consultant or an environmental consultant? Did you volunteer? Did you found a new organization to address a specific need in your community? However you define your community. Now, why is distinctive contribution so important? It's one of Stanford's stated criteria. That's one reason, right? Personal characteristics and contribution. But there's another reason, and this applies to other programs. Admissions is a two-step process. The first step is evaluation, determining the qualified. And at Stanford, there are always too many qualified applicants. And that's really true of most top MBA programs. And the second part of it, though, is selection, crafting a class determining which candidates to admit among those evaluated as highly qualified. And this is actually a quote from an article written many years ago by the previous director of admissions at Stanford, Derek Bolton. And I thought he described the process so clearly that I've been using it ever since. Now, what's the implication for you as an applicant to this selection process, the second part of the admissions process? The implication is that Stanford has no reason to admit someone without something distinctive to contribute, or someone who is not a change agent, someone lacking a record of past impact and contribution, no matter what their stats. So yes, the stats are important, but they're not everything. They can get you to the door and they can keep you out, but they're not going to get you across the threshold. All right, let's go back and review the 4 strategic steps you need to think about, the 4 parts of the framework before and while putting your application together. You want to present evidence you can do the work. You want a realistic goal requiring an MBA from Stanford. And you want to show that you know how you intend to use it. You want to show that you share Stanford's value and meet its criteria. And you want to demonstrate you'll be able to contribute to class discussions, the school's community, and ultimately make Stanford proud to have admitted you. Now let's look at the specific elements of Stanford's application. I've already touched on the grades and transcripts. I'm not going to go over that again, but let's look at some of the other elements. The first one is a job and activity history. All right, there's no two ways about it. You're going to have to be really succinct. The resume should be no more than 1 page as strongly suggested by Stanford, unless you have more than 10 years of work experience. And you should always focus on achievements in your resume, not responsibility descriptions or task descriptions. And the same is true of the job history, the employment history boxes. I would personally work on those first. Don't treat the form and boxes as a throwaway. They're very important. They're context for your essays, they're context for everything, okay? And you must show impact and contribution here. Realize that if you have a few jobs and activities, those boxes, see all the characters, etc., could even be more than the required essays. As we discussed in that little exercise we did a few minutes ago, quantify your impact whenever possible. And the same is true of the activity history, similar directions. For all activities, Stanford gives you 320 characters to describe your activity, interest, and your role, impact, or contribution. Obviously, focus on that impact and contribution, but give them enough context to know what you're doing. Now, let's go on to the essays. Stanford has 2 required essays, and they allow you a total of 1,050 words for those 2 essays. You can divide that among the 2 essays as you want, though Stanford recommends 650 words for the first essay and 400 for the second one. So the essays are a great place for you to show fit, to reveal the person behind the achievements, behind the numbers, and to portray yourself as a thoughtful, self-aware change agent. You want to demonstrate that individual perspective that comes under the 3rd criterion. Stanford's signature question, iconic question, is what matters to you most and why. The suggested length is 650 words. In my opinion, this is the hardest MBA essay question because you really need to think about what is important to you, why it's important to you, and when have you acted on those values. What are your priorities? And I find that those who answer this question in a way that shows initiative, and it says that word again, and an I care attitude do well in the admissions process. And don't forget to think deeply about and to answer the why part of the question. Now, the second question is why Stanford? And again, it's roughly 400 words. That's the recommendation. And you need to know 2 things to respond well to this question. You need to know why you want to pursue an MBA at Stanford. That's almost always tied to your goals and aspirations, which you mentioned briefly in that employment section, way back, about 20 minutes ago. And you may want to define the short-term goal clearly and simply in terms of function plus industry. How will Stanford help you achieve what you want to achieve? You can and I think should include longer-term goals or aspirations, if possible, in terms of what you hope to accomplish and how you hope to change the world. If it isn't obvious why an MBA will help you advance towards that goal, explain your reasoning. But you don't have to be afraid of an unconventional goal. And the second thing you need to know is Stanford's program. How will you take advantage of the many different opportunities at Stanford, whether it's the D School, the entrepreneurial offers, and then get specific. Okay, I'm talking in generalities now because I can't be specific because it's too individual, right? I don't know each one of you. That's something that we can do when we work with you one-on-one, and we do it. But you need to be specific about the elements of Stanford's program that are going to help you achieve your goal. This is not a question about brand or ranking. This is about how you intend to take advantage of the opportunities at Stanford to realize your dreams. Then, given your past experience in education, how will you achieve your goals? What it shouldn't be an ode to the wonderful faculty, unparalleled career opportunities, and fantastic peers that you'll find at Stanford GSB. That is incredibly shallow. And that could be said about any top MBA program. Again, specifics count. Think of what we've been discussing in terms of Stanford's motto and its criteria. Can you relate these questions, especially A, to either the motto or the criteria? You should be able to do so. Now, you could take an anecdotal response and tell a story incorporating what you did, how you did it and felt, and the impact of what you did on others and on you. And this is particularly appropriate for SAA. Start with, here's one approach, there are many. You could start with an anecdote that epitomizes your values and shows you living that value, and then discuss the influences that experience had on you, or you can discuss how this passion developed and where you intend to take it. Or you could start with an influential moment in the past that made you realize the importance of whatever is important to you, and then bring it forward. Those are just a couple of ideas for how to approach, especially SAA. The optional questions at Stanford. Here's the first one. Think about times you've created a positive impact within professional, extracurricular, academic, or other settings. What was your impact? What made it significant to you or to others? You are welcome to share up to 3 examples. And you have approximately up to 1,200 characters for each examples. They are optional, and I will get to the optional question 2 in a minute. They're optional, but I strongly encourage you to answer them and highlight additional times when you demonstrated the initiative, contribution, impact, and demonstrated leadership that Stanford values. In writing these very brief essays, a CAR approach can be extremely effective. CAR stands for challenge, action, result. So challenge, what was the situation or challenge you faced that motivated action? What was the need that you perceived? Action, what did you do to address the situation, to fill that need, or to handle that challenge? And finally, results. What were the results for both you and others who experienced the impact you had? Again, you can have up to 3 examples of roughly 200 words each, but go by the character count. Optional essay number 2. Tell us about a time within the last 3 years when your background influenced your participation at work or school. And this is up to 1,100 characters, approximately 180 words for each example, and there's more information. We are interested in how your background may influence your life experiences. In answering this question, consider how your background, such as your work, education, skills, interests, culture, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, gender identity, race, ethnicity, how you grew up, and other factors had an impact on your recent actions and choices. Now, they're giving you lots of options here. I would choose one time. Tell us about a time within the last 3 years when some element of your background influenced your participation at work or school. And finally, and again, as you're thinking about that element of your background, think about an element of your background that motivated you to act and initiate and perhaps lead. Stanford also has an additional information option, and through all of the elements of your application, we believe that we get to know you well. Complete the section only if you have critical information you couldn't convey elsewhere, actually, on your application. Extenuating circumstances affecting academic or work performance. Do not include essays, and please be brief. So this could be extenuating circumstances, would be circumstances outside your control. It could also be something positive, like independent research not noted elsewhere, or something along those lines. There is no word limit for this, but I really would take the recommendation and be very brief. Now, recommender selection. Stanford's has 2 letters of recommendation, and I have 2 suggestions. They want 1 reference from your current direct supervisor or the next best alternative. Definitely someone who has supervised your work. And then the second recommendation can be from an individual who can best represent your potential impact. So that could be from a non-professional organization in which you have been involved. But there seems to be a preference for professional recommendations. Both can be from the same organization. But if you do take from the same organization, perhaps take from people who have supervised you in different projects or something like that. Now, my 2 criteria for recommenders are: you want somebody who knows you well. Don't be seduced by title. And they should know you, they should be able to comment on your leadership potential, your potential for meeting, your leadership potential, I think, is key here for having an impact. And then the second criteria is they should be willing and able to write a strong, positive letter of reference for you. And you should ask them if they're willing to do that. If there's any hesitation for any reason, just move on. We also have 10 tips for recommenders, which you can refer your recommenders to. And I would encourage you to encourage them to write in specifics, provide concrete examples, anecdotes, and focus on initiative, leadership, personal growth, impact, and innovation. And they'll pretty much get the same recommendations at this URL, especially the specifics part. Now, what about the interview? Congratulations if you're invited to interview. The Stanford interview is usually conducted by alumni. It is a blind interview, and the interviewer only knows what they see in your resume. It is likely to be a behavioral interview and will focus on your past behavior. And you can expect questions like, tell us about a time when, because when this happened, or when you demonstrated leadership, or you dealt with a difficult interpersonal interaction. That's a very typical kind of question. And I strongly urge you to review Stanford's MBA interview page. They have excellent advice on it. They're not putting it up there for their health. It's for you. You can also review GMAT Club and Be the GMAT threads before you interview, so that you can see if anybody posts interview feedback. Review your application before your interview. Again, the interview will not have seen it, and you will have put your best stories in there. So definitely review that, and also prepare additional evidence of your demonstrated leadership potential, your ability to be a change agent and a self-aware person who will contribute to Stanford's class and community. So prepare to explore your past experiences to show fit with Stanford's value and criteria. Ahead of time, identify experiences that show leadership, initiative, creativity, intellectual vitality, and jot them down. Experiences that show you as a change agent, jot them down. And also just some things that you're proud of, jot those down and write which of Stanford's key qualities those achievements reveal. In addition, prepare questions to ask about Stanford and about the alumnus's experience both at Stanford and as an alum. Because part of the interview is about letting you get to know a little about GSB, as well as them getting to meet you in person. Now let's go back to your goal in submitting an application to Stanford, and that is to show you belong at Stanford. And we're going to do that by going through the 4 key strategies, 4-part framework for demonstrating you belong. So part 1, present the academic credentials that show that you can do the work and excel. Have a goal that requires a Stanford MBA. 3, show that you meet Stanford's criteria and share its values. And 4, demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute distinctively to class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud. And now we're going to have that contest, okay? So in the chat window, please, the first 3 to answer my next question get a free consultation with me. Okay, the question is, what is Stanford's motto? The whole thing. Okay, Rajat, you got it. I think UTK got it. And Trevor got it. Okay. Carly, you can jot down their names. Boy, most of you got it. Good, good. I'm glad. All right. I'll give you another chance. This is just be the first one, okay? And please put it all in one response, all right? Next question. What are Stanford's 3 admissions criteria? I'm just going to 1 on this one. Isha, you got it. All right. Okay, wonderful. Isha got it. All right, good. So let's go over those briefly. They are intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, and personal qualities and contributions. And I'm going to give right now an almost final word of advice. The Missions Committee readers are sharp, intelligent professionals. Don't try to craft, fake, or cover up. That dab of makeup won't do it. The best presentation of you is an authentic reflection of your achievements and dreams, keeping in mind the 4-part framework that will persuade Stanford to want you. Now, at this point in the masterclass, I'm wondering if you could share with me what was the most valuable concept, idea, or piece of advice you heard so far in today's masterclass. In the chat window, please. What was the most valuable concept, idea, or piece of advice you heard so far in today's webinar? Get specific, past actions and initiative. Good. Be unique and original. Okay. Be specific, keeping it specific. Good. Being specific when writing the application. All right. Quantify comments. Excellent. Show that you belong. Okay. Oh, great. Car. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. That was very helpful. Now, my goal for this webinar is showing you that all 4 elements of this framework are needed for acceptance to Stanford GSB. Not just 1, not just 3 out of the 4, because to get accepted, you need to show that you both belong at Stanford. That's basically parts 1 through 3, and stand out in the applicant pool. That's part 4. And what you need now, however, is how do you do that? You need the how applied to your individual circumstances. And for that kind of critical advice, you need to get accepted and work with one of our outstanding consultants. We want to guide you in showing that you both belong at Stanford or whatever MBA program you're aiming for and stand out in the applicant pool. We want to guide you in creating an application that as a whole spotlights your strengths and mitigates your weaknesses. That has all 4 parts of the framework, an application that accomplishes everything we've discussed here today. Here's what you get when you work with Accepted. You get access to expertise and experience. You can reduce your stress, save time, optimize your school choice and application, and mitigate weaknesses. Now, some may say Accepted is expensive, and we're definitely not a cheap service because of the quality of our staff. However, there are also expensive risks associated with not using Accepted. Reapplication can cost a couple $1,000s, especially if you have to retake a test and do prep for it. You have 1 additional year of pre-MBA earnings, and that can easily cost in the 5 figures in dollars. There's a potential that you could have gotten to a better program with lifelong higher earnings and what some would say a better network. And that could cost you in the 5 or 6 figures. Every year, we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected that they wanted to work with us. They would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. But enough from me. What do accepted clients say? Well, here's one client story. Our client had below average for Stanford stats and other challenges. Natalie Greenblatt Epstein, accepted consultant and former admissions director at 3 programs, who's going to be joining me for the Q&A, worked with this particular client. And what did he have to say after getting accepted? I'm really excited to be going to Stanford. In all the interviews I had, there wasn't a single question that I wasn't ready for. I owe a large part of my success to her, to Natalie. Or this next one was for a different consultant, Michelle Stockman. I'm in at Stanford GSB. Thank you for your pivotal support. I really believe you made a significant impact on my application and acceptance. Different people and challenges, same result as Stanford. Now, I can't promise that everybody, gets accepted to Stanford who works with us, because that's just not true. But we'd sure like to make that significant impact and guide you, if at all possible, to acceptance. Now, it is now July. There is time before Stanford's round 1, September 9th deadline to work with us. Contact us ASAP, and we'd be happy to help you from scratch or review and edit your essays. Our goal is to guide you so that you present all 4 parts of this critical framework and show that you both belong at Stanford and are a standout in the applicant pool. And that's what we did for the clients you just heard from. Now, I promised you a Q&A, and we're going to have one. And I think we can, if you folks are willing, we can also go over a little bit. Okay. So let me get the Q&A window, and let me also introduce Natalie Greenblatt Epstein. And you can also see my smiling face at now. I'm not going to be focused on the, okay, Natalie, I'm going to make you a co-host. So she can come on. All right. Hi, Natalie. How you doing?
Hey, Linda. I'm good.
Good.
How are you?
Good. We got a lot of questions here. Okay. And you can, again, feel free to pose questions in the Q&A window. So anonymous attendee writes, I'm from India, currently pursuing an executive MBA from the world's 16th ranked school. Would that impact my admissions decision?
You're in an EMBA program right now? Can
That's
you
what
clarify?
he writes. Yeah.
Okay. So I think as a former admissions director, I'd be asking, why are you applying to another MBA program if you're already in an executive MBA program? That would be a big question I would have.
Yeah, it's not going to help you. But all right. Okay. Here we have another question. Yes, there will be a recording available later. You'll get an email with it. Okay. This is kind of a long question, but I'll try and abbreviate it. This Ram has an undergraduate bachelor's in pharmacy that he got in 2010. He also completed a 3-year bachelor's in business administration in 2021. And he has 8 years of entrepreneurial experience in agricultural-based product. He also was at one point a pharma consultant. He was in product development, etc. The company, however, is not very big or well known. How does my pharma consulting experience compare with other consulting profiles in finance, IT, etc.? Will it be considered good enough experience? How does my profile stand in front of consulting, IT, and finance job profiles who have worked with big brands? So the question, I think, boils down to a question of how does big brand versus unknown brand play out in consulting and pharmaceutical consulting as opposed to strategy consulting or business consulting, something like that.
Okay. So with regard to brands versus non-brands, I mean, I think there is an advantage to working for a brand company before you apply to school, but I've worked with many clients who don't work for a brand company and still get into the top schools. And I think the big difference is that they can show the impact that Linda was referring to in the webinar. The other thing that I want to make clear is that admissions directors are typically risk averse. So that big brand gives them a little bit of comfort. But again, if you can show your impact, then working for a non-brand pharmaceutical company may in fact set you apart from other applicants in a way that would be beneficial for you.
Right. I think it's a double-edged sword. Usually if you work in a smaller company, you have greater opportunity to have impact. That's the kind of the upside of it. The downside is you're going to have to work a little harder to educate the admissions committee about what you've done and the impact that you've had. Okay. Does having a CPA, CFA compensate for low GMAT or academics? Is that low GMAT? It looks like it's low GMAT and academics. It's a tough one at Stanford.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for Stanford, you're applying against people that have really high GMATs and high GPAs at some of the best schools, although I was at the same program that Linda was at with Kristen Moss, and she basically said, you know, a great portion of their candidates, I think it was maybe 50%, come from state schools. And I've had about 50% of my candidates who have been admitted to Stanford apply from state schools. So, having said that, I think the CPA and CFA do compensate for something. It indicates that you have some quant skills that could mitigate the issues that you're having with the test and the GPA, but I don't know if it's going to be enough for a program like Stanford.
Right. It depends how low your stats are. That would also be a factor. There's no question, I think, that those two certifications are highly credible, but when both the GPA and the test score are low, it's hard to kind of get over the hump. As Natalie said, admissions staff are risk averse. So you would have to really show significant impact in order for them to want to admit you and overcome any risk that they might perceive as based on your test score and GPA. And the farther away you are, the greater that risk is. If it's just a little bit below, CPA, CFA might work. If it's more significantly below average, it's going to be a lot harder to go with. That would be my take. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Are there any examples of individuality or values of what we could contribute to GSB alumni? I mean, I would say authenticity would it's hard to give examples. You can read the some of the student bios on the Stanford GSB website. I also interviewed last summer a young woman who just got her MBA from Stanford. She was like, I think, an opera singer and a classical dancer, and she'd worked in business. Carly, if you can find that and then post that link. It was a fascinating interview. I think it was last summer, and unfortunately, I'm not remembering her name at the moment, but maybe you can post that in the chat window. And then the other part is there's also was another, it was Calypso, and then they sold it and we interviewed them again. That was earlier this year. We have, various student interviews, both on the podcast and sometimes on the blog. You can look at that and then get examples of this individuality. But again, it's not, you're all individuals, Diego. You don't have to try and make yourself more individual than you are. You have to portray your individuality. This was kind of the point I was trying to make earlier. Natalie, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, you really can't fake it. I mean, Linda was talking about the makeup. You just can't fake it. And so you have, your history, and we would work with that history. I mean, when I work with a client, one of the things that I do is really, try to dig into their background. And when we work together to dig into that background, we often find things that I call my hidden gems, because the client doesn't even know that this would be something that's unique and significant. And we might work that in thematically into the application. So, we have to work with what you have. You can't make it up. So
right. Now I have to tell you, at one point towards the end of the webinar, I started chuckling, and that was because Ujala had just posted a comment. I was trying not to look at the comment windows, but I did see this one. Natalie, I think you would appreciate it also. I think we're both at a point where we would appreciate it. Wrinkles are not bad. Don't cover it up. It shows experience.
I love it.
All right. So thank you, Ujala. We both needed that. Okay. Let's get back to the questions. Are optional questions really optionals, or should we answer them?
For Stanford, those optionals should be answered. So Kristen also said something.
She said they're optional. She said clearly they are optional. Don't answer them if you have nothing to say. However, this is a competitive process. And if your competition is answering them and providing great examples, what's with your application?
Right. Exactly. Those are also in the Stanford main essays. You don't have a lot of room to talk about your impact. And these essays, these optional essays, were actually created because Kristen did not want people to talk about work in what matters most. And people were talking about their achievements in what matters most. So she gave applicants a vehicle to talk about these achievements, and those are called the optional essays. I refer to them as the impact essays, and I'm going to stick with that. These are the impact essays, opposed to what matters most, which is a very soulful, dig deep into your motivations kind of essay. And why Stanford, which is, how do you fit in here? And what in your greatest imagination are the problems you want to solve, your passions, with business solutions. So to me, they're not optional. For other schools, they may be, and they, you know, if they say this is a space for you to talk about anomalies in your application, like gaps in work experience or why you're not using your supervisor to recommend you, and this is like straight out of Columbia's workbook, then if you don't have that, don't answer that, because they don't really want to read it unless there's something specific you need to address.
Right.
Stanford's
right.
a completely different beast with those optional essays. They're impact essays. Show your impact.
I think Kirsten means them to be optional, but I think Natalie's 100% right that you're shooting yourself in the foot if you don't complete them. Archie asks, when I work with Accepted, do I work with only one executive or more than one executive? You work with one consultant. We call them consultants. You work consistently with that consultant, barring some unforeseen circumstances. We do have what we call peer review. So a certain subset of drafts that you submit will be reviewed by somebody else. And thank you for the question, Archie. We are happy to answer questions about working with us also. Anonymous attendee asks, which round should one apply in? How do I know when I'm ready? You want to take it?
Oh, that's a great question. How do you know when you're ready?
Right.
I think if you've if you're talking about rounds, then you know, contacting us next month, probably not a great idea for Stanford round 1. I mean, we may need a little bit more time to work with you on round 2. It's not unheard of. And if you have written drafts for your essays, it might be very, very doable. But if you're starting with us on a package, we need some time to really let that process unfold. So when are you ready? You're ready when you have done all the research on the school, you know it's the right school for you, you have the criteria that Linda went over in the webinar, and you're ready to write. And if you're ready to write today or tomorrow, then we can definitely hook you up with a consultant for round 1. We can do that at any time, but you know, don't leave it to the last minute.
No, don't leave it to the last minute.
When you leave it to the last minute, it's a disaster. So,
and there's no my personal recommendation and my rule for years and years and years, probably, you know, since I started, is you want to apply for the earliest round possible, provided you don't compromise the quality of your application. So if you want to apply for round 1 and you have your competitive test score and you have competitive work experience, you can still produce an excellent application for a round 1 deadline. But if you don't have the test score yet that you want, or you don't have the work experience that you want, or you want more, or you want to wait for a promotion or a new project, then wait. Okay, let's see. This is another anonymous attendee. I have a 720 GMAT, but very strong academics, top college, rank holder, PE background, also a nonprofit co-founder. Should I retake the GMAT, or will I be better off focusing on the essays and the rest of the application, given I plan to apply round 1? It says strong academics, so I assume it's good grades.
Oh, do you want me to take that?
Yeah, you can take that, sure.
So, here's what I would do. I would focus on, if we're talking just specifically for Stanford, I'd go ahead and get started on the application. It may not hurt you. PE is an area that's pretty competitive at Harvard and Stanford. There's a lot of people applying from PE at both of those schools. So you do want to stand out in a very unique way. And so I would really start working on the applications in the meantime, I would also sign up for another GMAT, because you want to be above the average. If you can. I mean, I've worked with people that have been below average on GMAT and have gotten in. But you know, they had their own unique qualities that really stood out. And I'm not saying that you don't, but I'm just saying that PE is really a common application among these schools. So you want to take every opportunity that you can to stand out, and getting above average on a GMAT might be helpful. There might be a point at which a consultant would say, you know what, I don't think doing this really matters. So you can always cancel your test. You don't have to go. But having it there in your back pocket is not a bad idea. And, you know, putting aside some time, like each week or each day to study for it will not hurt you. At the same time, you're working at work and on your essay. So forget your other life.
I kind of would like to know more, I think, about your background. Mm-hmm. Before I'd answer that. The bottom line is that the more ducks you have lined up, the better off you are. And if you were surprised at your GMAT score, in other words, if it was lower than you anticipated, then I probably would be much more in the retake camp. If the GMAT came in pretty much where you anticipated and you studied and there were no unusual circumstances that contributed to a lower GMAT, then I'd probably say optimize your application, focus on your application, and don't retake. So anyway, it's you're kind of on the cusp there. All right. We have another anonymous attendee. My father's an executive director at the place I work, nonprofit. How should I address that? Ask somebody other than your father to write your recommendation. That's how you should address it. I'm going to try and go a little bit more quickly because we're way over. Do top schools such as Stanford and others tend to have an unspoken bias preference between GMAT and GRE? At this point in time, the only school that I know has a preference is INSEAD.
Me as well. know nobody else has said they have a preference.
All right. I recently started a business and will be growing revenue for 3 months by round 1 and 6 months by round 2, but I feel like I'm not equipped with all tools to be an entrepreneur, hence the Stanford MBA. Will Stanford think I'm too new or early in my journey to be considered? How would you answer that? Is this another one of those questions where we need more information?
Yeah, I'm trying to follow this on the Q&A. Yeah, I would want more information before.
Yeah. And one for what are you actually doing? How is the business going? What is the rest of your profile like? What do you intend to do with the business while you're at Stanford? Why did you start a business 6 months before planning to go to business to apply to business school? I'd like more information. Okay. Diego asks, does the admissions committee have a preference for candidates who have worked for known brands compared to those who've worked in a small family company? I think we addressed that before, so I'm just gonna, it depends what you did and the impact you had. Let's see. We answered that one already. Any specific memorable application you helped draft for an applicant who got selected? What helped make it memorable? First of all, we don't draft applications. That's number one. You draft the applications and go from there. Yeah. Okay, Carly, that is one of the ones that, please post that URL. And you might even find the other URL if you go to that URL. I'm trying to get you some of those interviews I mentioned earlier. Okay, let's see. Any specific memorable applications you have helped draft for an applicant who got selected? What helped make it memorable? I'm going to, Natalie, you can add on to this one. There have been many, many memorable applications. I can remember working years ago with a client who founded a support group for people of her ethnicity, which is not very open to emotional expression, after the loss of her father, or the passing of her father. And that was, again, it showed that need, it showed that initiative, etc. And Natalie, you were talking about the essays have to have a certain, the essay one, what matters to you most and why, has to have a certain soulful quality. I remember reviewing an application, an essay. We had a fairly new consultant at Accepted at the time, and she was working with a Stanford applicant, and I was reviewing her work. And this applicant had taken his Harvard essay and tried to turn it into what matters to me most and why. And I said, this essay lacks a soul. I remember very clearly saying that this essay lacks a soul, and it has to have a soul or it's not going to go anywhere. And so the consultant, she's excellent, and she worked with the applicant to bring out the soul, to dig deeper, to go further and kind of explore more fully his motivations and what matters to him. And he ended up getting accepted to Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton. But I remember very clearly saying this essay lacks a soul. For a school that's proud of its touchy-feely class, it has to have a soul. Natalie, go ahead. You can any memorable applications that stick out, and
yes,
without I know there are many. Without
I won't reveal who anybody is.
Yeah.
But I mean, all of these are very like personal, personal issues. I think that people that like don't do well are the people that do want to talk about work. These are things that happen, outside of work, and it has to be about them. It can't about you, the applicant. It can't be about another person, even if the other person is part of the story. So, and I just feel like it has to evoke emotion when I'm reading it. So it doesn't need to be sad, but like, I do remember an application that just like gave me a warm feeling or made me chuckle outside my, normal stoic self. So I just thought, yeah, you have to dig deep. It's very guttural. You can use things that represent that, that passion or those motivations, metaphorically, that has worked for me, like where someone has talked about, I had a client that talked about a toy, and then went into the story, and it was like an education for me to read the story because I didn't know much about what was going on in his country at the time, but it taught like he it was about him and how that affected him and how that motivates him today. Or motivated him when he applied for school. So there's just so many possibilities with what matters most, but it is a difficult essay to write. You need some time to think about it. Rarely do my clients come up with what they want to write about in our first brainstorm. And, they think about it, and then we talk about, oh yeah, let's go for this one. This, I think, is going to work because it evokes emotion in them. It evokes emotion in me. It's going to evoke emotion in the admissions readers as well. And I think that's probably the most important essay for Stanford. I really do.
Oh yeah.
I think if you write an excellent what matters most essay, at the very least, you'll get an interview.
You certainly get serious consideration.
Yeah.
And it is a difficult essay to write.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go on here. I have a 760 GMAT, Q49, V44. I understand that objectively it is a good enough score. However, I am an MBB consultant from India. Do you think it puts my quant abilities at doubt? No. Okay.
No.
And again, I'm not going to be able to get to all of these, but I'm going to get to several. Trevor writes, are GMAT, GRE, and undergrad GPA weighted equally in the application process? Are high GPAs from state schools weighted less than GMAT, GRE versus high GPAs from target schools, i.e. Ivy League? It's if you have a high GMAT and a high GPA from any school, you're showing you can do the work. Okay. I don't think plus you've already gone to the state school. I don't think you're going to be able to change it right now. So I would, the combination of GPA and GMAT or GRE is what's going to count. Do you agree, Natalie?
Yeah. I mean, again, I've had
Again, you can't change
lot of, like 50% of my clients who've gotten into Stanford came from state schools. So it was not an issue for them. It shouldn't, like, that shouldn't be the definitive issue. And Kristen was very clear that she gets great candidates from state schools. And there, you know what, there's some Ivies that we know that pad scores. So I think that's taken into account as well. I just think GPA is a terrible measure. You can't get around it. But I mean, there is a difference in schools, whether or not they're Ivy or not Ivy.
There's a difference in teachers.
There's a difference in teachers. There's a difference in majors, in what you study. It's an unfair measure because you're not comparing apples with oranges. So I think, you know, what I like to think about was really, you know, the academic indicators. We're looking at, you know, the transcript as a whole. I mean, we didn't rely that much on GPA. GPA was not a big issue. It's a big issue now because of all the rankings. You know, like US News has made it an issue. So I don't know. I have a lot of strong opinions about GPA, and a school like Stanford does look at their application holistically. And so I feel like if they, you know, saw what you majored in and saw how you did, and it's going to be a huge difference. And you can't compare apples with oranges. So
and you can't change the school you went to.
No.
Undergrad.
I'm proud of my state school. So I loved my state school, and I had an opportunity to go Ivy, and I chose to go to my state school because I had a very generous scholarship to attend there. And so I graduated without debt. And then I went back for my graduate degree, and then I worked there for a really long time, for 11 years. So.
All right. Here's another question. I have a legal background, but mostly in advising on financial transactions and M&A, and currently work at a fast-growing renewable energy startup currently raising its Series C round at 0.5 billion valuation, providing legal support to the group across West Africa. I'm looking to pivot into venture investing and have had fellowship with New York-based PE VC firm Two Sigma Ventures, and currently undergoing VC training at Future VC as a fellow. I'm not quite sure what the question is, though. Is there a question here? I mean, I think your experience is going to be very attractive. I don't see a question. So if you want to come back with a question, I'll try and get to it. Do MBA comps show willingness to accept people coming from corporate law, specifically in Europe? This is from Audron. There's general interest in accepting Europeans because they are somewhat underrepresented in the applicant pool. Lawyers are going to be looked at kind of on the merits, not good, not bad, right? Or what would you say, Natalie?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, I think you have to indicate, you know, why you need the business degree on top of the law degree. That's going to be an important question for you. So certainly a lot of dual degrees with law. So it's not as if business schools are opposed to bringing in attorneys. And I mean, I always had a few attorneys in my class every year. So as long as they had a good reason for wanting the MBA and all the other standards were met or exceeded my expectations, then, you know, there's no like opposition to bringing in attorneys, if that is what the question was. So. Okay,
great. All right. We're way over, and I'm going to bring this to a close with a thought, a story, and a question. First off, though, I want to thank Natalie for your time and your insights. Thank you, too, for coming and for joining me. I also want to thank you, applicants, for coming, for your questions, your time, your attention, your participation, and now that final thought, story, and question from me. The thought: there is a paradox inherent to admissions. You have to fit in, and by that I mean you have to show that you belong at your target school, in this case Stanford, in terms of your goals, your academics, your work experience, and the values. You have to show that you're going to be a valuable member of their community. And then you have to stand out. You need to stand out in a highly qualified, intensely competitive applicant pool. You need to show that you're going to contribute distinctively, add a special something, and make the admissions committee members proud that they voted to accept you. Now, the 4 elements of acceptance framework provide you with a structure. Let us help you with the implementation of that structure, one-on-one, with individual guidance, as I mentioned earlier. Let me tell you just one more client whose investment and accepted paid off in spades. A couple of years ago, we worked with the fellow who had less than common work experience and strong stats, but he came from a very much overrepresented group in the applicant pool, and several of you have mentioned that. He worked with Jennifer Bloom and today has referred many of his friends to Accepted. Here's what he wrote after his acceptance, and I'm just going to read part of it. I got an accept from Stanford last night. Even as I wonder which one I want more between Stanford and Wharton, this is a dream come true. Thank you. I don't have any new words to express the gratitude that is filling my heart. I hope all your other candidates find wings to their dreams. Now, this happy client followed the steps on the screen. His dreams and so many of Accepted's clients' dreams have found their wings. So can yours. Get accepted. Now, you've stayed for the webinar, you've stayed for the pitch, you've stayed for the Q&A. You're clearly interested in what we have to say. Here comes the question. Could you help me out and share, if you're not a client or planning to become a client, what is causing you to hesitate about engaging with Accepted? And you can put that in the chat window. Actually, I'll also open the Q&A window since we've been in there. Cost, okay. Affordability. All right, that is a definite, understandable concern, and it's just a reality of life. I do want to share something with you. This is a brand new tool. I haven't even tried it out yet. It's so new. Actually, let me put this to all of you. Here we go. It's a brand new tool that will show you the potential ROI of working with an accepted consultant, or the potential cost of not working with an accepted consultant, because our service is an investment in your future. And, obviously to make an investment, you have to have cash, but I would really encourage you to go to accept.com/MBA/services and see if you can afford our minimum, which is $340, and that would give you advice. Or you can, you can take advantage of our more comprehensive services. And if you're in the United States, we have payment plan options available for you that unfortunately they're not available to non-US citizens, or permanent residents, I should say. Okay. And if there's any other comments. Then I want to again thank you for coming. Thank Natalie. And do you have anything to add to what I just said in terms of affordability?
I think it winds up paying off. So we have very satisfied clients, and there is an opportunity cost to trying to do this on your own. So even if it's just an hour to get advice, I think it would be worthwhile.
Right.
So,
and somebody posted about lower cost alternatives in India. There obviously are lower cost alternatives in India, but I'm not sure if they're former admissions committee directors or team members. And I don't know of any. It's possible that there are MBA admissions consultancies in India with 27 years of experience in the field. So there are some distinctions and some differences. But whatever you do, I want to wish you the best of luck going forward. Good luck with your applications. And thank you very, very much for participating and coming and joining us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.